Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I've commanded you, and surely I will be with you always, even to the end of the age." We call it the Great Commission, but sometimes I think we miss the point of what the Great Commission's saying. There are things there that we tend to elevate above where maybe they should be. After all, it's like the man who said, my only problem with public speaking is sometimes I put the wrong emphasis on my syllables. We do sometimes. So let me tell you the 3 ways I think sometimes we miss the main point of the Great Commission. One is we think it's a missionary passage. That is something for people going from our nation to all other nations. Very parochial view, by the way, but I guess if you're in Cuba, that verse only applies if you're going to Africa. In Africa, that verse only applies if you're going to the United States. In the United States, you get the point. It's as if it's only for people who are leaving where they are to go somewhere else. And somebody says, but it does say go to all the nations. Well, it says go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. If you think it's just a mission passage, then what happens is you absolve yourself from the responsibility of walking out your door in whatever nation you're in or whatever nationalities are in your neighborhood. You absolve yourself from walking out and telling them the good news, from making disciples. It becomes something that's only important when you're going there. The second thing I think we misemphasize sometimes is we think the Great Commission is a baptism passage. Well, it says baptizing them, so of course I'm a big believer in baptism. We'll talk about that some more in another episode, but I'm going to tell you, if you think that passage is only about baptism, you miss the main point. The point's to make disciples. And if you think it's just about baptism, you're not talking about Jesus, and you're really a little bit getting the cart before the horse. And so you end up baptizing a whole bunch of people without making disciples of very many of them. And the third way I think we misemphasize some of the Great Commission is that teaching them to observe all things I've commanded you is about getting the doctrine right. And if you think that passage is about making disciples in a doctrinal sense, then you end up emphasizing knowledge over discipleship. And yes, I think just like with baptism, I think there's truth there. And just like with missionaries, I think there's truth there. But I don't want to make disciples of a doctrine. I don't want to convert people to what I'm convinced the Bible really says about, whatever is important to me and however I see it. We will talk about what that means some more later, but I'm going to tell you that passage wasn't written just for people going over there, and it wasn't written to prove that baptism is how you come to Jesus, and it wasn't written to prove you get all things right. It was written to remind us that Jesus tells us to go into our world and make disciples.